Jeff Ryan is a very, very special person to the neurodiabetes business. As Art said, he has both two Activa systems to control his essential tremor, and in addition to that, he has a Paradigm pump. Now, since Jeff's physicians couldn't make it here, let me give you a few of the vitals. Back on March 25th, 1998, Jeff was implanted with his first neurostimulator. Almost 3 years to the day later, he was implanted with his first insulin pump. Now, Jeff also does a number of very unique things, as you'll find out. And I want to tell you a couple of things about him. First of all, he has a very, very good sense of humor. He gave me his card earlier. And Jeff's a farmer in a little town called Frisco, about 10 miles south of the Minnesota border. And he and his brother own a farm, and he has a card, and it's Two Guys Farming Incorporated. Now, Jeff is guy number 2. And I love their mission. It's feeding the world because Mayo Clinic was already doing brain surgery. But Jeff has a very serious side too, and it is his impact on people, and people that are facing similar situations to what he has. Jeff ran into a gentleman, lived about 30 miles away from Frisco, who was thinking about having brain implants for essential tremor, and he came to see Jeff to see what, quote, this technology had done for him. And unfortunately, this gentleman passed away before he could have the implants, but his son came to see Jeff afterwards, and he said that his last months were very, very different because, quote, Jeff had given him hope. And I want to read a little quote from Jeff himself about his feelings about this. That's why I have email discussions list, why I do support group meetings, continuing education seminars for nurses and doctors, school visits, and public presentations on the stimulator, and why I invited TV cameras into the operating room for my second stimulator implant. Somewhere out there, I'm going to find a person who will benefit from this technology like I have. If not, I will find a child and spark an interest that may lead them to a career in science that brings even better things than Activa has thus far. Even if it's only one person, it's worth it. Jeff Ryan is a very special person, not only because of the devices that he has, but also, as you see, he is a very special person because of who he is. Jeff.
So you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, he has 2 deep brain stimulators and an insulin pump. Well, I wonder if, let me stop you right there and make one thing perfectly clear. My heart is fine, okay? Many of you can stop salivating now. When I was 3 years old, I was diagnosed with diabetes. I had to spend about 2 weeks in the hospital in La Crosse, Wisconsin because of it. Maybe it was a good thing that I was so young because I really don't have any memories of life without all those restrictions and things that I couldn't do because of diabetes. With experience, though, low blood sugar was always easy for me to spot. This was before we had the nice, fast, and easy testing equipment that we have today. Usually what you knew was if you started becoming shaky, then you probably had low blood sugar. So that was a pretty obvious sign. But as time went by, the tremors became a little bit more obvious. Eventually, I went to my family doctor to look into it a little bit further. And we talked about a variety of different things, went through the symptoms. We went through his big Merck manual. He looked at it and said, when we follow the flow chart here, it looks like you have what's called essential tremor. So he referred me on to another neurologist in La Crosse again, and we confirmed essential tremor. So once again, La Crosse was associated with bad news for me. And then after years of drug therapy, I opened up the newspaper on Friday the 13th, as luck would have it, 1997. There was a front page article in the Des Moines Register that told about a surgical procedure performed in Des Moines that worked wonders for this patient's tremors. My focus was on the results, though. I kind of glossed over the part where they put your head in a vise and drill a hole in it while you're wide awake. But based on the results, I knew that this device and this surgery was the answer for me. So I went ahead with it, started making phone calls, found out that I could get something done eventually. It took almost 9 months before I got an official answer, and we had surgery, but the wait was well worth it. After reading that article and achieving the results I did, I promised myself that I would do all I could to make sure someone else could be as fortunate as I was. When it came time for my second stimulator implant, I talked about it with one of the TV health reporters who'd done a couple stories about my case. I invited her to come into the operating room and document the entire procedure so that we could share the story with other people. Now, I will share one story with you today that we talked about last night, and Art, your wife, requested that I share this with everyone, so if I run long, take it up with your better half. When we had the procedure, I got everything done. The paperwork started showing up. Everything went fine with surgery. And I got the usual bills. And then as time went on, about 2 weeks later, the other statements showed up. One was from the anesthesiologist. And about the same time, I got a check in the mail. The bill for anesthesia was $1,350. The check that I received in the mail was for $1,100, and it was made out to me. So I called around and started asking questions and said, this was a mistake. It should have gone to the doctors. Well, no, the doctors hadn't signed their agreement with the hospital at the time of my surgery, so they weren't preferred providers. So they were going to charge me the full price. I'd already had this procedure done once the previous year, and actually twice the previous year. We had a lead wire break, so I went through it twice. I looked at those statements and I realized that those doctors collected an average of $924. Now all of a sudden it was $1,350 a year later, and I didn't really feel like I'd been 50% more asleep for this procedure than the other ones. So we argued back and forth about it for a while, and finally the insurance company took it up and they decided that no, you have to pay the full amount. So I decided I would negotiate with the doctors. I sent them a check for $925. And I said, this is what you got in the past. It should be good enough this time. I figured we'd negotiate up, settle for $1,100, and we'd all walk away happy. The insurance company had other views. I was required to pay the full amount. So I had a balance of $427 with them right then. I called up the doctors one night after I woke up laughing when I came up with my solution, and I asked if I could come and pay the bill in person. And they said, yeah, that'd be fine. Can I pay it in cash? Yeah, that'd be fine. So I got a hold of a friend who works at a bank, and I told him, I have this problem with these people. Get me $427 worth of pennies. The friend came through for me. We got the pennies. We gathered some other friends that night, and we unrolled them. So it was loose change. And if you're wondering, $427 of pennies weighs about 260 pounds. So I had to get a two-wheel cart to haul in my change. So I went to the doctor's office and I parked my pennies out in the hall in my cart, laid my statement down on the table, and I said, I'm here to pay this bill. And they said, okay, that's fine. I want to pay it in cash. Is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. No problem. I said, well, I don't have it on me right now, but just a second. I'll be right back. So I went out in the hall and I pulled in all my pennies and started lobbing the loose bags up on the desk. And as I got done and closed the door, then I looked at her and I said, tell Dr. Krunicki, who was in charge, who most of my arguments had been with, that we're even now. Just to have a little bit more fun with them, we threw in 3 extra pennies just to make sure that they'd count it. So when my statement showed up about a week later, it showed a payment in cash, $427.03. They scotch taped 3 pennies to the bottom of the statement. Life with Activa in the Paradigm has been such an improvement for me, though. Activa has given me the ability to make good use of my hands again in my daily work. My parents, my brother, one full-time employee, and I run a farming operation. The beef operation and hay operations are my department. And in those departments, for instance, in the beef department, we have 700 people every year who depend on me, depend on these hands to make sure that they get fed. We have probably around 8,000 people that depend on us for their pork needs, too. Another couple thousand depend on us for the hay that we feed to those dairy cows, those dairy goats, so they can get milk, cheese, ice cream, and everything else. So Activa's power for me has extended well beyond just my own personal situation. Earlier this spring, Justine Fritz and a crew came to my farm to get some footage of me in my daily life. We did a whole bunch of activities around the farm as the day went by. And then we also went to town. We went to a local cafe, had breakfast, where I was eating breakfast, drinking coffee with ease. We also went to my John Deere dealership, and I ordered some parts there, got some paperwork done at the counter, had to sign a few invoices, which is not uncommon. So incidentally, if any of you need a new tractor or combine, let me know, because I think I signed 6 purchase orders that day. And actually, you might want to check with the boss, because I signed Art Collins' name on a couple of them. At the end of the day, though, we put the cameras away, we went to a local restaurant to eat. Since I was the local, the crew let me pick the place. And we went to a place that I'd never really liked for most of my life. Don't get me wrong, though, the food was great, the place was terrific, the staff was the best, but they had glasses that were absolutely terrible to handle as a person with essential tremor. It had a long stem, it had kind of a wide base that was hard to grab onto with 2 hands and balance it. So, and on top of that, they didn't serve it with straws either. And that's what I always knew when I had essential tremor. Before Activa, you could pick a place to eat based on the way that they served their drinks. You knew which places had good glasses to drink out of, whether they had a straw. This one had a straw, but it was more like a tiny little capillary tube, and you couldn't move much volume with it. So as we sat there, I ordered water, didn't think anything about it. But on this particular night, things were different. I now had 2 Activa stimulators and a Paradigm insulin pump. I didn't have to arrange my dishes in such a way to clear a path to get a drink to my mouth. I didn't have to find my syringe so I could take some insulin as time went by. The 6 of us sat and talked. We told stories and laughed about our experiences at work. Some of the crew had been on some unusual assignments, and I told them about how you can get some doctors to work just for pennies. As time went by and the laughter continued, I reached for another drink, and something occurred to me as I raised my glass. Right there before my eyes, when I least expected it, life was happening to me. There were no restrictions. There were no limitations. There were just everyday things happening to someone who turned into an everyday guy. It seemed fitting that people from Medtronic were there with me. At that instant, one sound made me aware of the significance of the situation. There were the usual sounds from the kitchen. There were people in the restaurant engaged in conversation. There was laughter everywhere. But right there in my hand was a glass of ice water making its way to my mouth in an effortless motion. It was completely drowning out everything else around me, and it was dead silent. Earl, that has to be the greatest sound that I've never heard. Thank you all for making it possible.
My wife Ann and I had the opportunity to first meet Jeff at the Science Museum over in St. Paul one Saturday afternoon with Scott Ward. The foundation had just funded The Secret Life of the Brain, and we were having a session over there. And as we walked in, there were lots of children around, and the booth where the largest group of children were located was at the booth that Medtronic was sponsoring, with the prime attraction being Jeff. And he would turn off his stimulators and shake uncontrollably and turn them on and be just normal, and the kids thought it was the best magic they'd ever seen. Last point is that what Jeff didn't tell you, he doesn't much like the Internal Revenue Service, and you can guess how he's going to pay his tax bill. Our next patient represents the...
Thank you, Heather, Melissa, and Griffin. One of the great opportunities I have in my job is to travel around and hear stories from people that I meet that are very similar to the 5 that you've heard today. In fact, it's a small world. On this trip I told you I was on yesterday in New York, I was visiting a major investment firm, and one of the portfolio managers came up to me and he said, "I want to shake your hand." And I thought, well, maybe he bought the stock 3 weeks ago and he's happy. But that wasn't it. He pulled aside his jacket and he said, "I want you to see my Paradigm 512. He said, "I've had this for about a month and it's completely changed my life." And he said, "And last week, our 3-year-old was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and I'm going through and I'm going to get trained, and then he's going to get one." So it is one of the most rewarding parts of my job. We heard about some letters earlier. Earl read a letter similar to the one we hear every year. I, just before I came down today, got a copy of our annual report. And some of you may remember Jeff Ryan from last year. He was the Iowa farmer that has the Activa neurostimulator for Parkinson's or tremor, as well as a diabetes pump. And Jeff has corresponded with us over the years, and he's featured in the annual report this year. And I want to tell you what he wrote and sent to me. It said, "Art, for some reason the people at Medtronic always make me smile. Thank you for providing me with so many reasons to smile." Jeff Ryan, 2003. And these are just a few of literally the millions of stories that we can hear from patients around the world that are benefiting from what we do on a daily basis. You know, while that videotape was playing, there was one individual that I saw in the audience that was paying particular attention. For those of you that have come to this program over the last several years, you may remember a farmer from Iowa who had a business, two guys farming. His name is Jeff Ryan. He has the same device as you do, Juan, an Activa brain stimulator. He also has a MiniMed insulin pump, and he is one of the greatest supporters of Medtronic. One of the most enjoyable parts of my job is I get emails and letters periodically from patients. And Jeff and I have had an email long-distance relationship as he passes on great stories about Medtronic's products and the patients they serve. So for all of you that remember Jeff, I'd like him to stand up and wish him a very happy holiday. Jeff Ryan.